Nunya Nimrata. Humiliated in Nevada. Nimrata, humiliated in Nevada. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, don't forget to like them and share them far and wide. Of course, if you're on Locals, you are on the best spot. So definitely go and sign up on Locals. peoplespundit.locals.com. Share the videos far and wide. Every little bit helps. By the way, share the public polling project far and wide. Don't let me forget about what we're going to do here from polling moving forward. The Nevada caucuses are tomorrow. And immediately after the Nevada caucuses, we will get a new national poll. Then we will go into either Florida, South Carolina. It depends how much time we have, because, of course, South Carolina has to come first. But sharing it has an enormous influence. You have no idea how much you're helping us when you just like videos and you share them. So do that. Smash the like button. And don't forget to hit the notification bell when you sign up on Rumble and Locals. That will let you know when we're going to go live. Locals will do that. Period. It'll just send it out if you are a subscriber or a supporter or a member. All right. So listen, Nimrata humiliated in Nevada. Okay. I don't know what else to say. This is delicious if you are a Donald Trump supporter. This is history once again. Every contest in this cycle thus far, from Iowa to New Hampshire, now to the Silver State, there has been a record, a historical first, record-setting, record-breaking, and there is no doubt that Donald Trump is driving them all. And he drove it last night, even though he wasn't even on the ballot. And we'll talk about that a little bit. If you were watching our election coverage last night, which was a quick little throw together because I've been traveling, then you'll know some of what we're going to say here. So bear with me if some of it is repeating. But real quick, before we get down to it, because I think that it is important that we go back and remind everybody what we told you before New Hampshire, hell, even started to talk about it before the Iowa caucuses, and how the primary, the decision by the Haley campaign to put her name on the primary ballot, which disqualifies you from the caucus ballot, which is where the delegates are allocated, was a calculated risk, a gamble that they made. The media reported it as a brilliant gamble. Okay, we're going to go over all of that and remind people that this was part of a propaganda campaign. So we were absolutely looking to none of these candidates to see how many votes they would get. There was a kind of shadow argument made by Governor Lombardo and others saying, look, Nikki Haley and others who go on the ballot and the primary ballot may be disqualified from being on the caucus ballot, but you voting in the primary does not necessarily disqualify you from participating in the caucus. So go vote in the primary and then come and join us in the caucus where it matters, but vote for none of these candidates. It wasn't huge. It was kind of like an off-the-cuff thing at events, at the Get Out the Vote, at the Caucus for Trump or whatever it is event. I can't remember the name of it that they put on 2 weeks ago. You certainly heard him say that on the panel. It was a little bit of an offhanded joke, but he wasn't joking. This wasn't a full court press, however. And yet this happened. Every single county voted for none of these candidates. This margin, which is currently just under 33 points, it is 32.7% margin for none of these candidates. That is the de facto Trump, and most certainly a weaker version of it. Trump would have done better had his name actually been on the ballot. There's just no doubt about that. Every single county did do this, and that margin will increase because there still is vote out. Nevada is it is one of the worst states when it comes to not only election integrity, but when it comes to the competent administration of an election. And I'm sorry, but that is just the truth. Even with Governor Lombardo as the governor, he has done he's made some efforts. He just doesn't have the numbers to do as much as he would like. But even with Governor Lombardo, it is tough because it is, of course, a mixed administration, right? So there is still vote out in Vegas and the Clark County where Vegas is. And as you can see, it is voting for none of these candidates by a greater margin than the statewide. And Nikki Haley has less support than she has statewide. So what does that mean? If we expect, and if we are to expect, and we do, that these numbers either remain the same, may even get a little bit worse for her, then that will help pull her the overall margin or the overall vote share for none of these candidates up, because Clark County is, of course, damn near 70% of the state, which 70% of the state's voter registration population is in Clark County, including many, many Republicans. Only about 60 something for Republicans, but a little less than statewide. It's still a lot. Right, so that we do expect that, but it's more than that. She did the best as expected in Washoe County and outside of Washoe County and Carson City, which we expected that to be the case. We talked about that last night. Why? The Washoe County used to be, particularly, let's start with this one first. It used to be a stronghold for Republicans. Democrats would win Clark County, and then Republicans would win the rest of the state, and that would determine whether or not a Republican could carry this state. Washoe County has been slipping away long before Donald Trump came on the scene. However, it does appear to be coming back a little bit into Trump's camp, but more than that, how well he does in Clark County is what is making Nevada, he's leading in that state right now. More so than he ever did in 16 and 20, where he pulled out a few polls with leads here and there, but for the most part, Joe Biden was winning. And so was Hillary Clinton. But anyway, Washoe's more educated. It is certain more upper crust. There's Reno is there. And then, of course, Carson City, same thing, where there's just more educated, even Republicans. Not all Republicans are equal. We all know that. They're not monolithic. And the more, I would say, never Trumpy Republican demographic is in Reno, as opposed to, and actually more than just even Reno. There's some really rich big properties, resort areas. And that's why Nikki Haley did better there. But it's about the same in reported as Clark County is. So they're basically probably going to wash each other out. Carson City also has some vote out. But if you just go around the rest of this state, you will see there's still a little vote in Lyon. It's massively against Nikki Haley. Mineral and not Lander. What was it? Eureka. Mineral and Eureka are basically fully reported, but you do have still some very, very Trumpy counties like Elko and Nye, where there is still vote out and she's just getting killed. I mean, look at 80% plus voted for none of these candidates in Nye. Look, you have got to squeeze out a ton of votes in a county like Nye if you're going to fight Washoe basically to a draw if you want to beat a Democrat. Even you could probably, it is technically possible to lose Washoe County and then still carry the state, but you would need to do much better than most recent Republicans have done in Clark County, and then you would need like a rural deluge to come in, and that absolutely is possible. Lombardo, he barely kept, when he won the gubernatorial election in 22, he barely kept Washoe, and then he closed Clark to just a few points and got a huge margin out of the rural areas. Not as much as Laxalt. Honestly, Laxalt did better in some of those rural areas, but Laxalt lost Washoe with one single mail-in vote dump that we didn't get to watch counted because the cameras went off. And then he did worse in Vegas. But honestly, had Jeff Rowe and the scam artists that have way too much of the market share when it comes to Republican consultings in campaigning, if it wasn't for, and Adam Laxalt thinks the guy's the smartest guy in the room. He's a joke. If it wasn't for them playing the slot machines instead of walking and knocking on doors, maybe Adam Laxalt would have closed the gap as much as Joe Lombardo did in Clark County, but he did not. and Adam Laxalt lost. So there you have it. If he would have just closed the gap in Clark, he could have suffered that loss in Washoe. But they weren't there. They were too busy playing the slots, rolling the dice, playing blackjack at Caesar's Palace instead of knocking on doors in the Las Vegas suburbs. So he came up short. Listen, this is history. And before we get into it, I just want to bring up some of the stats. Since none of these candidates was instituted in 1975, all right, the very next year when it appeared on the ballot in 1976, in the Republican primary for Nevada's at-large congressional district, none of these candidates came in first ahead of Walden Earhart with just over 16,000 votes. And Earhart won just under 10,000. Dart Anthony won just over 8,000. So we were not talking about, 30 plus point margins. We're not even talking about majorities here. It would win pluralities, and the 76 Republican primary for the at-large congressional district was it was the strongest plurality that none of these candidates has ever received. Now, in state law, Nikki Haley, and just like Walden Earhart was, they will be recorded as the winners, technically, because that's the way the law is. The runner-up wins. Now, this happened again. Oh, by the way, Earhart would go on to lose to Jim Santini in the general election. So when you see something like this, it is a pretty big flag that your party can't stand your guts. In 2014, Democratic gubernatorial primary as well, none of these candidates won, and it won with only 30% of the vote. So all in all, because there was the 78 primary on the Republican side that followed the 76 primary for Congress. And then there was in 78 as well, the Secretary of State primary. And then in 1986, the Democratic Treasurer primary. All saw none of these candidates win with pluralities. Never. And here's the record for Donald, here's the record Donald Trump is helping set already again. Even not even being on the ballot. None of these candidates has never won with majority support, let alone damn near 2/3 a super majority. Because when all these votes are tallied, as I said last night before I signed off, it will tick higher. And Nimrata will tick lower in Nevada. She could fall below 30%. It depends on whether Clark and the late arrivals are a little bit more pro-Haley than they, overall. It's possible they're not. It's possible what is left to be tallied is even more anti-Haley. There was a good chunk of late arriving ballots. All right. So there you have it. We're 3 out of 3 now. In Iowa, of course, and we know this, the records that we're talking about are threefold. Donald Trump beat I always forget his name because he's just such a loser. And he got crushed by Bill Clinton. I always forget anyway, but it was in the 80s when Bob Dole, thank you, had the record for the largest margin to win the Iowa caucuses. And of course, that was just 12 points. Then Donald Trump comes along and he stomps it more than twice the margin of more than twice the size of the historical record for the margin in Iowa. Even despite low turnout, he sets the record for the most votes received in an Iowa caucus. Republican, Democrat, whatever. Ted Cruz had the record, and he beat Ted Cruz's record. And then, of course, the third record in Iowa was the fastest call made in an Iowa caucus. That it's over the race call. All right, so go on to New Hampshire. Despite Nikki Haley and Sununu getting all of these Democrats to vote, getting all these behavioral Democrats to vote, independents that really are Democrats, despite anywhere between, in Salem, for instance, like 20-something% of her vote was actually not a normal Republican primary vote. Those were Democrats being targeted, being put, and then something like Hanover Township, it was over 70% of Nikki Haley's vote can it be attributed to typical Democratic voters, behavioral Democrats. Despite all of that, Donald Trump still beat her by over 11 points, and he set the record for the most votes received in a primary in New Hampshire ever by any candidate. Bernie Sanders had the previous record. John McCain, once upon a time, had the largest on the Republican side, and then he surpassed his own from 16. He went through Bernie, of course, and he set one that's probably going to stand for a while because the population is just not rising there, except for those who are coming in from Massachusetts. You have others who are leaving. So it's going to be tough to beat that record. And then the largest share of the overall population to vote for a candidate in New Hampshire as well. All right, so now we're on Nevada, where he's at the caucuses are tomorrow, and of course we expect he's going to take all of those delegates, but he's not even on the ballot in the primary, and yet another record is set. I don't know how you can ignore that, and it is a big deal because of this reason. I want to show you an article and give it to you in context, if you don't mind. If I can find it. Where are you? Just had it up for a second. Here it is. And by the way, I tried warning this reporter that this was fake, that she was being duped, and she didn't listen. All right. So here's Axios. Before I even get into the Axios, we started talking about this before Iowa, and then really ramped up our talk about it before New Hampshire, and have been talking about it ever since. Based on documents that I have reviewed and conversations I have had with people who are supporting Nikki Haley and have been made aware of their long-term plan, what their game plan was. The game plan, of course, was to outperform in Iowa. It didn't work. That's why the speech she gave, two-person race. It's because that was a speech written for her coming in second place. She failed to do that. She missed expectations. But the role that the Silver State was playing in their plan had been older than before they knew that she was going to come in third place in Iowa. They made the decision to join the primary ballot in an attempt to use their media friends to help them push a propaganda narrative that you're going to see right now as we go through it, but to give her momentum ahead of South Carolina, because of course she needed and she expected to win New Hampshire. So the real goal, before Iowa, the plan, if it was executed properly, would have been finish second in Iowa, outperform Ron DeSantis in your expectations, get momentum heading into New Hampshire, beat Donald Trump. They thought they were going to beat Donald. Let's cut the shit. They thought they were going to beat Donald Trump in New Hampshire. It was only until final week that Chris Sununu and Nikki Haley and all those started to publicly make statements that very clearly revealed that reality was catching up to them. But why were they so confident before that? Because they thought that they could take 10 points off the table. $37 million in a little state to drive turnout from another party that hates another candidate and you're running against makes a huge difference. And that is the reason she outperformed. She got killed with typical Republican primary voters. She would have been stomped by more than 20 points. But they thought, you know what, with this little plan, I think we can close the gap 10 points. I do. 10 points, I think we can do it. That's why they were so confident. But it didn't happen. But the plan was that she was going to do that and then use this primary for headlines like this and to continue the momentum, we call it, right? Primary physics, to continue the momentum going into South Carolina and stun the world. And even if they, quote, survive South Carolina, they go into Super Tuesday and several states try to do what they did in New Hampshire. Obviously, this is not working out too well. But what happened last night, is just as bad of a setback as her not coming in first in New Hampshire, or frankly, not even getting it to single digits. They would have taken a single-digit loss. I cannot believe, like Sean Trendy said, I cannot believe they are this stupid. They don't know the delegate math. We all know at this point that any hope of her to be the nominee is over. And it's even over if she planned on racking up delegates in the event that something happened to Donald Trump. Catastrophe befell Donald Trump. That's over. Her time in the Republican Party is over. As you know, I've been traveling. Even a bunch of DeSantis supporters and donors cannot stand Nikki Haley now. Because at a point, this is what happens with partisans. It gets to a point where actually the hatred for Nikki Haley grows beyond, because she is sacrificing the party's potential success. So as much as they may or may not like Donald Trump, it's still better than what Nikki Haley is doing to the party. Trump's team worries about a hollow victory in Nevada. I will tell you right now, I absolutely knew this was totally fake. First of all, when the media makes a thing over something that's expected, which is, for instance, we've talked about this before. We talked about this last night. It was very confusing for Republican voters this cycle. You had a Democratic governor with Democratic lawmakers in the state change the state from a caucus to a primary, write a law doing it. The party went to court suing. We have a right to allocate delegates how we see fit. We want to stick with the caucus. You know where I come down on this, or at least you should. You definitely will if you watch last night's broadcast. I don't believe they should have kept it a caucus. If you want more non-white vote participation, you should have welcomed the primary. Donald Trump was still going to stomp her anyway. If you're getting more non-white votes, then they participate at higher rates in primaries. They're notoriously difficult even for Democrats to get out in caucuses. So if I was Donald Trump, I would have just done it too. Was this the strategically smart way for delegates? Maybe. Obviously, he's going to get all the delegates, or at least we expect him to. But it doesn't mean it was the strategically smart thing to do for the general election in the future. He was still going to always beat Nikki Haley or whomever the anti-Trump, never Trump rival emerged to be, which if you've been watching the show, you know it was never going to be Ron DeSantis. It was going to be Nikki Haley. And the fact is, they're not worried about this. This is totally fake. This is part of the AstroTurf propaganda plan of planted stories that I told you to expect. It is expected that primary turnout exceeds caucus turnout. And honestly, after what I saw last night, that may not even happen. In 2016, about 75,000 came out and caucused in the Republican caucus in Nevada. We'll see what happens tomorrow. But it doesn't matter anyway, because now that none of these candidates beat her, and it will be 32, 33 points, at least be 33 when they're all counted, there's nowhere for her to find a silver lining. And that's why her statement this morning, she was dead quiet. Nobody could be reached for comment last night over at Nikki Haley's headquarters. They were dead silent. And this morning she emerges with what? And I'm going to show it to you after we get an attack against a Republican voter. That's what she's doing. She has now reached the stage of, I'm going to attack and insult the voters. All right. Donald Trump is virtually assured of winning all 26 of the delegates available in Nevada's GOP caucuses Thursday. But his team is worried that the state's plan to hold the primary 2 days before the caucuses could wind up embarrassing the former president. I'm going to tell you right now, I spoke to two people. Both of them called this story utter bull. And honestly, you don't always believe what campaigns say. The reason why I believe is because it doesn't make any sense. It's like a story reporting on an expected nothing burger. All with, by the way, unnamed people. Why it matters. Nevada's confusing combination of a state-run primary and party-run caucuses has set up a scenario in which Trump could get fewer votes in the caucuses than rival Nikki Haley does in the GOP primary. Just to be clear. And yes, we are going to talk about Biden as well. But just to be clear, Nikki Haley is not going to crack. It doesn't look like. She could, maybe. Let's say she gets 22,000 votes, even in a low turnout caucus, because as of right now, none of these candidates has just under 44,000. There is almost no, there's, I mean, there's never almost no chance, but of course he's going to get more than 21,000 votes tomorrow. These reporters made total fools of themselves by taking these planted stories from the Haley campaign and running with them. So either they got played and looked like fools, or they just look like tools and they were in on it. Which one is it? I don't know. But honestly, when you get a report this badly wrong, like Miss Sophia over here did, you should say something about it. And I quote tweeted her and said, I told you this was fake. You should have listened. That's possible because Nevada's GOP decided that candidates can appear on either the primary ballot or the caucus's ballot, but not on both. Trump is on the caucus ballot. Haley is in the primary. Zoom in, as if they're really digging deep here, right? Nevada law requires the state to hold a primary if more than 2 presidential candidates are on the ballot. Nevada's GOP, led by Trump loyalists, opted to hold the caucuses to award the party's delegates. That was widely seen as a move to ensure that Trump would win all of the delegates who will help determine the GOP presidential nominee. Republican caucuses typically are attended by the party's most enthusiastic, MAGA-leaning supporters. I'll tell you what, in 2016, it was the most non-white we've ever seen it. And Trump crushed Marco Rubio with Hispanics. But now Trump's team is concerned. They're concerned. Can you hear the concern? They're concerned that voter turnout in the caucuses might be dwarfed by that of the primary the state is promoting, a scenario that could throw cold water on Trump's delegate haul. That's what they wanted. That right there. That's the propaganda. That's the narrative. That's been the plan to push this narrative. This narrative has been the plan to push since before Iowa. She just did it right there. Little mouthpiece. Good little mouthpiece, Sophia. Boeing slipped the check under the door. Trump advisors in the Nevada GOP fear that turnout for the caucuses might not even match the 50,000 voters who already have voted early in the state-run primary. Between the lines. For weeks, Trump's team has been trying to inform voters that if they want to cast a ballot for Trump, they can do so only in Thursday's caucuses, not in Tuesday's primary. Trump's campaign has printed brochures and sent out fact sheets, and Trump went to Nevada after the New Hampshire primary to hold a rally in Las Vegas. Trump's team also has complained that the Nevada Secretary of State's office is engaging in election interference for reminding voters that they can't vote twice on the primary ballot, a requirement under state law. Behind the scenes, the Trump campaign's complaints don't stop there. But again, Trump is the de facto none of these candidates. Why Lombardo wanted this to happen. He saw this as like I don't want to say Pyrrhic victory because that's not really true, but I don't, By the way, we're looking at like 74,000 votes if this was to hold. So how many in the primary? It doesn't matter anymore. Senior Trump advisors became unhappy with the campaign state director, Alita Benson, who advocated for Trump to participate in the caucus after realizing the caucus planning was not coming along as well as they liked. Again, I said do a primary. Just do the damn primary. Why? Because I'm an advocate for bringing more voters into the system, and that would have been the smartest way to do it. 2 people familiar told Axios. Caucus sites weren't finalized until early January, and the Nevada GOP currently only has just one paid full staffer. The campaign stands by the plan to skip the primary and take part in the caucuses. But the sources said that when it came clear that Nevada's GOP and the party in Clark County, by far Nevada's most populous county, were not well equipped to run the caucuses, the campaign blamed Benson for not activating volunteers and dragging the campaign into a chaotic process. And honestly, some of this may be, there may be some stuff like, sprinkled in here. See the intrigue. This is good. Let's get down to this because it is not true. They can vote in the caucuses if they want. That is absolutely true. No, so the state cannot tell voters that they are breaking the law if they vote in the primary and then they vote in the caucus. That's just not the case. And here, they mentioned this, which is worth bringing up. Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo, a Trump ally, had told the Nevada Independent that he plans to caucus for Trump and vote none of the above. It's not even none of the above. She can't even get that an option in the state-run primary. He encouraged voters to do the same. It's none of these candidates, not none of the above. Get basic shit right if you're going to write about a state and its election. He has criticized the dueling contest as chaotic and confusing and said they will disenfranchise a number of voters. I agree with that. The Nevada GOP chair, Michael J. McDonald, National Committee member Jim DeGraffenreid, and Sigal Chattah are all Trump supporters. McDonald, who was indicted on felony charges of falsely certifying Trump won the state in the 2020 election, faces trial with 5 other accused Republicans on March 4th. He has introduced Trump at rallies and urged Nevada voters to ignore the primary. So mixed signals there. It is confusing, but that narrative that she ran down, that is exactly what Nikki Haley's campaign wanted. The good folks over at Red State, which is totally, listen, it's Crew's Crew 2.0. Brittany Sheehan regurgitates everything. I mean, it's a republish. Why Nikki Haley will win today's primary in Nevada and what worries Team Trump. You believe this? Tuesday, former South Carolina governor and United Nations ambassador Nikki Haley is set to sweep the presidential primary preference in Nevada, clinching an outright win. Is anybody else laughing hysterically inside? You wonder why Big Con hasn't won an election in 20 years. These people are a total joke. It never even occurred to these idiots that none of these candidates may win this thing. It never even occurred to them. Why? Because they're stupid. Because they're out of touch. It never dawned on them, folks. When, of course, we all knew, and as soon as I hit live yesterday, I said, let's see how close none of these candidates is going to be. Sweep. The idea she was ever going to sweep this thing is ludicrous. Maybe in your own never Trump mind. And immediately we started prepping. Washoe County will be the most favorable to Nikki Haley. We'll get a good idea how well none of these candidates, how many votes none of these candidates is going to get. Immediately, Washoe dropped over 60% of its vote, and she was down 12 points to none of these candidates. Even in the most never Trump county in the state in a Republican primary. Former President Donald Trump's name is not printed on the ballot for the state-run primary at all. While Haley will likely ride the momentum of a purported victory, she won't exactly strike gold in the silver state. This is the Haley hype. This could have been written by Nikki Haley's campaign. You understand that? Both Axios sprinkled a bunch of what they half-ass reporting they did about, maybe the caucuses weren't organized as good as they could have been organized or as well as they could have been organized. And then they basically took all of the talking points that Haley's campaign wanted to push to create this narrative. In walks Red State, Brittany at Red State. And they were right there for her. The Town Hall Red State group, right? You always can count on them to feed you bullshit. Cernovich tweeted something the other day, and Jack was like, yo, was he listening to our conversation? Because Poso and I talk about this a lot. Big Con is Big Con because they don't want to be different than the media that they claim to, I don't want to say fight against, but, cry, whine, constantly bitching and moaning from the Guy Bensons on Fox News about how biased the media is. What a media bias. Mitt Romney did not cut that poor gay boy's hair. The media is so biased. They like that. They want to be Mike Wallace. They want to be Chris Wallace. They want to be Brett Baier. Jonah Goldberg loved his seat at the table on Special Report. They are the same. They're a con. They're no different. They follow the leader just like left-wing media does. They are just jealous of those who are leftists in media. They want what they want, but they do not want something different as a business model. They do not want better information to voters. They just want a fair shake at tainting the flow of information like the liberals get to taint the flow of information. Their goal is not actually the truth, objectivity, the facts. As it turns out, they're just jealous little who just want to be their own version. They just want a slice of the same rotten pie. At the Republican National Convention, Haley will not be awarded any of the 26 delegates from Nevada. Instead, the delegates will be awarded through caucuses. We all know, blah, 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 blah. By this method, Trump is essentially guaranteed to take all the delegates. The only other candidate, blah, blah, blah. But here we go. The law did this. We all know what happened. The dueling state-run primary with the auto-printed ballots and party-run caucuses have been a source of contention among local Republicans for months. While the governor, Lombardo, is committed to caucus for Trump on Thursday, he previously expressed concerns about voter confusion. And let's see, the same article from the Nevada Independent. And disenfranchisement that could lead to low turnout in the general election. The NRC also condemned the dueling contest to parties' insistence on running caucuses. NRC proposed that Republicans should be using a primary as a practice run on ballot harvesting initiatives. So what they wanted to do was use the primary as a way to see how well their efforts so far to harvest ballots is working. And again, I'm not even going to disagree with those people. I don't agree with them usually on anything else, but I'm talking about as far as what I would have done and advocated for, and I did advocate for. You should just have the primary. But they didn't. So Trump at a rally in Vegas last weekend encouraged voters to skip the primary and commit to caucus, which I said was at the time, remember, a mistake. He should have flatly told people to go and vote in the primary anyway and vote for none of these candidates. Strategically, that is the smart thing to do because then you can ensure that what happened last night happens. Yet it happened anyway, organically. Lombardo making a few off-the-cuff comments, go vote in the, to the Nevada Independent folks did not do what we saw happen last night. Right, Laura. What does that say? It says it's an organic you, lady. We don't want you. It means Trump would have beaten her even worse had he been on the primary ballot and they just held a primary. You're probably talking about somewhere in the lines of a 70-something% win. Because none of these candidates is a weaker version of Donald Trump. It's simply a protest. Listen to this. Nikki Haley has banked more than 50,000 ballots in the early voting portion of the primary. While the caucus turnout for Trump may be much lower. Ladies and gentlemen, she hasn't gotten anywhere near 50,000 votes. She is currently just above 20,000. Yet Red State over here is telling you before the primary, the day before, that she's got 50,000 votes in the bank. They're lies. Shame on this woman. Shame on Red State. And now how stupid do they look? Right. Look at you now. Look at you now, dummies. Dummies. How stupid. Trump could get 10,000 votes in the caucus now. It don't matter. They couldn't try to use this if they wanted to. Not now. That's why there was dead silence last night. As a matter of fact, let's go and get Nikki Haley's response, shall we? Let's bring up Nikki Haley's response. on Twitter. So now that she emerged from her cocoon, where she was hiding from the world, hoping daddy, mommy make it stop, this is what she does. Amy Moreno is just so funny. Normally I don't bring up just normal Twitter users on Twitter, but the woman is hilarious. Anyway, look at underneath. Hold on, let me read Nikki's first, and then I'll read it. Oh, there's Dilly, who is the, I guess you would say, the leader of the Dilly. Well, of course, they call it the Dilly meme team, but he's like the leader of what the New York Times called Trump's online war machine. And he's not directly connected with the Trump campaign. He's not like part of the campaign. He's a supporter, and so are his memers, and they do this for free and fun. Anyway, she writes, Republicans keep doing the same thing and getting the same result. And you got to love the word that she used. This is a Democratic used word often. A lot of the local races that we, for school board, that we were involved with around the country, there's a common word that Democrats use in all of them: chaos. What's wonderful about that word, and she's such a Democrat for using it, what's wonderful about that word is that it doesn't really mean anything. Chaos is good and bad. Chaos can be both. Chaos is not necessarily a bad thing. In order to overturn the apple cart, folks, in order to change the status quo, in order to break the status quo, in order to challenge the establishment and herald in an era of real change, it's going to get chaotic. There has never been a period of anyone's history, of any nation, in any time in the world, where massive change did not require chaos on some level. And that can be okay. And then she says, that's the definition of insanity. Actually, that's a kind of like colloquial misnomer. But anyway, this week, the RNC imploded. Yeah, that's Trump's fault. GOP House can't pass anything. Yeah, that's Trump's fault. Trump lost another court case and threw another temper tantrum, defending himself on, you wouldn't defend yourself on truth. You wouldn't go out there and say, if I don't have immunity and presidents don't have immunity, the country cannot be run correctly. Of course, actually, it was a well thought out response. Trump is not known for always going to Truth Social and posting well thought out responses, but the response that he wrote after the appellate court denied his immunity claim was a well thought out response. And by the way, if Donald Trump does not have immunity, then the Attorney General of Virginia right now can indict and arrest and indict Barack Obama for the murder of Anwar al-Awlaki. Because he was not an imminent threat. Al-Awlaki was a U.S. citizen. So if precedent isn't going to govern us anymore, because listen, it was controversial at the time, and they used bogus nonsense and leaned on precedent to claim that it was legal to kill Anwar al-Awlaki. No, it wasn't legal. It was murder. And if we're not going to abide by precedent anymore when it comes to presidential immunity, then go arrest Barack Obama. He's a murderer. And even if Anwar al-Awlaki was an imminent threat, was his 14-year-old cousin who he killed along with him. Folks, listen. Anyone who sits there with your stupid ass little patriotic nonsense like, oh, he was a terrorist, Rich. You're defending a terrorist. Let me tell you, 6 months before he was a terrorist, he was the State Department's go-to homeboy for moderate Muslim outreach. What the hell happened in 6 months? How did he go from being George Bush's right-hand man to being on the #1 kill list? Well, Rich, he was Osama. He basically was like, he portrayed as Osama bin Laden's right-hand man. Do you know that for sure? I don't. I mean, I know I was told by intelligence agencies who lie every time they open their mouth and every time they pen a memo, but I didn't know it for sure. Did you? 2 years ago, we were all just American citizens. Some of us were right, some of us were left. Now, most of us on the right are being called domestic terrorists, in case you haven't noticed. So if Awolaki, they were justified in killing him because he was such an imminent threat and a terrorist, what does that make you? Or me?
He's just in the way.
Yeah, you get dubbed being... Listen, people better understand this. You think this is going to end with Trump, you're out of your mind. Wait until they start drone striking people on their ranches in Oklahoma. You think I'm kidding? They're going to tell you, listen, that was totally justified. Mike Smith was a terrorist. He was an alternate elector for Donald Trump in 2020. That's a terrorist. We're pretty sure he was also involved in the insurrection on January 6th. What do you? They're already. You missed the manhunt of the Army veteran, a veteran, who was military police. You missed the manhunt in New Jersey. You know why? Eventually, when they got him, you know how they got him? He surrendered with his lawyer, Laura, because he was afraid they were going to execute him. And then claim, right, and can you blame him? And then claim that it was some kind of self-defense. The police had to do, the FBI had to do something. He's crazy. He's a terrorist. He had a gun. We planted it. I mean, we found it. Hold on. Let me get my force down. They're not on the roster this week, but as I tell you, I really do not do reads or advertise anything that I personally myself don't use. Men, if you did not get force from Brickhouse Nutrition, go there, use the promo code TPP or Boost PP, right? Isn't it Boost People's Pundit? Boost PP, I believe. Yeah. And that'll get you 15% off a force. I'm telling you, I'm waking up. My eyes are opening better, in the morning. I mean, I'm telling you, it's really something. Anyway, so now Nikki Haley, as you can see, has entered the inevitable phase of, it's your fault, you're stupid. Why are the voters so stupid? It's not me. Clearly, if I'm being rejected, it's because you're stupid. You know who this sounds like to me, Laura? And it's ironic because, she's her inspiration after all. This is Hillary Clinton. All day long. This is the most Hillary statement she's made to date. Amy's hilarious. You lost a race where you were the only candidate. You idiot. The whole, if you were the last person on earth, I still wouldn't saying? That's how America feels about you. That's what Brendan Dilley wrote. Bad hombre, delete your account. It's nothing short of total humiliation. And as Nika's, it's absolutely beautiful.
After that,
I would never show my face again. Never show my face again. I would be humiliated, and I would feel that humiliation. And it's like somehow Nikki Haley and her family seem to be unable to feel human emotion like humiliation. Her husband is the biggest cuck in the United States of America right now. Her stupid son is on Twitter defending his mother cheating on her husband. How much money and what job in the defense industry did they promise him? Because I don't know what else they could give a man to be publicly cucked, and he's overseas. How many Jodies is he getting right now? Bro, this is what they do to you, in case you were never served in the military and you don't know. You think they sit there and go, oh man, I'm so sorry. Come here. I heard about your wife. No, they don't. Your wife was banging Jody. Your wife was banging Jody. That's what they do to you until you either kill yourself or toughen up. And that's the point of it, by the way. Because we cannot have you all worried about your wife being a skank while there are people's lives on the line.
Yeah, that's how you get people killed.
How much money could they have given this man? What was he promised from Boeing? What'd they promise you, bro? My God. And I've never what kind of a mama's boy loser defends his mother for cheating on his father? What kind of I would be furious.
Oh, I'd be mad at both of them. I'd be mad at my father.
I mean, if it was no reason, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, right. Like, if dad was a drunken beater or something, who gives a damn or something. But, this guy is, by all accounts, Laura, right, you get a divorce and you leave. Right, you don't buy, exactly. But by all accounts, this guy is like, somebody, like a good guy. Nimrata humiliated in Nevada. Oh my God. Knick-knack, paddywhack, give a yucca bomb. Goes down in flames. All right, so let's show this real quick before we move on, and then there's something else I want to talk about. Joe Biden gets all the delegates from South Carolina, 55. Gets all the delegates, of course, from Nevada, and currently sits now at 91 delegates on the delegate tracker on People's Pundit Daily. If you haven't checked this out, I know I just put this up. It's not as robust as the Republican nomination page, which has the map and everything else. But that is simply because, and here you go, Rumble. Locals, I know you have it, but I'm going to send it to you anyway. Again, we need them both. And at some point, we're going to have a primary page up. I told people last night, so I'm just going to briefly say again that there's going to be a lot of changes. Oh, the API, Laura, is done and ready to be tested. Heard from the team this morning. I need to learn how to use GitHub, but, I'll do that after the show today. But they're going to walk us through it and everything on how to do it, right? It looks dope. It's multiple things. So we can target a single race, or we could target all the races that are happening that night and simply click through a row on the live streaming software. Laura knows what I'm talking about behind the scenes. And that row will change the graphics. And so we don't need to create new graphics. It just changes the data that's in on them. Folks, as it inputs. Yeah. And every 30 seconds it updates. Hey, and I'm telling you what's real cool. We're going to have what news outlets like Fox News and CNN and all the others have. But we're going to have even better graphics than that. One of them shows the candidates with the images of the candidates, everything you normally see, total percentages. They're side by side with each other, total percentages, the amount of votes that they have, right? What's in, what's reported in, a couple things about the state. How many electoral votes is that state in the presidential election? Things like that. And behind the candidates are column or bar graphs, because there are two versions, and they freaking move. As votes come in, they freaking move. It's amazing. I cannot wait. Cannot wait. I'm so excited. I'm going to buy Apple Studio to run this thing seamlessly. I'm just going to kick out and do it. And it's going to be dedicated just for that. Ooh, yeah. Anyway, so there we have Biden. Something came out with Gallup today that I think it's worth noticing going on. Ooh, you know what? Should we just do the... Yeah, let's just do the quick commercial break, and then we'll come back and we'll do something I think is worth talking about. Speaking of which, there they are right now. Speaking of which. All right, but before we do, we can talk about that more after we have a real quick word from our sponsors and friends at Jam and Bean, total patriots and artists, of course, in the art of coffee roasting. But they do so much more. And popcorn bacon.
Oh, I love it.
Nothing says I love you like bacon, like you just saw up there. You have, of course, Valentine's Day coming. I don't know what you do for your loved ones, but if they're anything like me or Laura, bacon's a pretty good gift. All right. But also, too, like I've said, whether you like K-Cups because you're in a rush or you like freshly roasted coffee, Laura got us this awesome tea set up. And because I really do like tea. I don't drink it as much as I would like to drink it. And their teas, I had gotten a bunch of them. What one was that I liked the best so far? What was the name of that tea, Laura? Yeah, can you get it? Because it was when my daughter was not well. She had the flu. So we made it. And I was starting to feel a little bit crummy myself. And I was really hoping I wasn't going to get sick. I just can't. Too much travels, too much with elections to do. There's just way too much going on. So I'm glad I didn't get sick. So Laura goes and basically brews up white gingerbread apricot. And it is an oolong tea, white oolong tea, by the way. And everything always has the ingredient because everything from Jam and Bean is natural. JAMNbean.com, JAMNbean.com. But it has the ingredients in it: ginger, apricot, rice, flower, orange, hibiscus, and rose hips. Yeah, rose hips. I'm telling you,
Which is great.
it was for a cold, everything. It was delicious. If you sign up for a subscription at Jam and Bean right now, use the promo code TPP40 at checkout. TPP40 at checkout. That'll get you 40% off. Plus, it will give you 10% off every time that subscription renews. By the way, Laura just pointed out that on the back of every one of them is instructions, right? So white tea instructions: steep for 3 minutes at 195 degree cup for 1 tablespoon per cup. So it's simple. It's idiot proof. You don't have to, it's amazing. It really is. And of course, as you all know, I love the popcorn, and I have a sweet tooth, but I'm not a candy eater. I'm too old to eat candy like that. So they have a lot of really cool freeze-dried stuff, whether it's Skittles, Starburst, the Bit-O Honeys are probably my favorite. But they also have saltwater taffy, cookie dough flavored, freeze-dried cookie dough saltwater taffy. I mean, people wonder how I do what I do, how I keep going as long as I have. There's no doubt that Jam and Bean is a big part of that. Love those guys. Love the guys, Jam and Bean. Also, as I say all the time, do not ever give any politician, credit for fighting the Fauci terrorism that came during the COVID era. It was everyday citizens and business owners like the guys at Jam and Bean who did the fighting, all right? The politicians caved. They all caved. Varying degrees, but they all caved. Nobody's a hero. Not Ron DeSantis, not Donald Trump, not Kristi Noem, not Gavin Newsom, not Andrew Cuomo. Nobody. Everyday Americans. Those were the heroes, like the folks at Jam and Bean. JAMNbean.com. Promo code TPP40 at checkout. All right. They'll make your day brighter. I'm telling you. They'll brighten up your day. Like this probably will if you're a Republican. Do you remember the loser, Rick Wilson? Or what's his name? I even forgot his name because I don't care. He's such a loser. Chris Wilson at WPA Intelligence. Polled for Never Back Down and polls for a bunch of other rhinos. And that's what happened. One of the main things that happened to Ron DeSantis' campaign, it was Never Trump 2.0 and filled with Never Trump 2.0. This Mark Caputo, he's a lefty, but I've known him for years. Good journalist. He started a Substack called the Bulwark or something, and it's going to be all about MAGA, reporting on the MAGA movement, how it crushed Ron DeSantis, but a lot of it had to do with the internal grift that went on in the DeSantis campaign. And of course, Chris Wilson was a huge part of that. So was Jeff Rowe. Anyway, do you remember him attacking me and others who weren't on the payroll, right? How unprofessional was this scumbag? How unprofessional of a dirtbag do you have to be to publicly attack other peers in your industry who aren't on the payroll for your candidate? See, the difference between me and Chris Wilson is I don't take money from candidates and then lie to you. He's a liar, a paid-for shill liar. Billed almost $3 million. That's how much Chris Wilson put in his pocket for a piece of shit polls all cycle long. So Ron DeSantis could finish 30 points behind Donald Trump in Iowa. $3 million billed to his firm, which he basically only runs because he robbed a bunch of data from his wife. Whole story. Really interesting, folks. What else would you expect from these people, though, right? Do you remember how he said, I don't know what I'm talking about, and he's so superior? So, by the way, Mark Penn, too, he's a grifter. Mark Penn, yeah, he runs the Harvard-Harris poll. He's a grifter. All right. Yeah. The pollster for Bill Clinton, the grifter. Everybody else is a grifter, too. Spencer Kimball at Emerson, grifter. The only grift here was you, Chris. You are the only one who took money from candidates. A candidate, but candidates, and then lied to people about the state of the race. That would be what you did, not me. Do you remember him wasting money conducting, I don't know, maybe 30 grand he charged them to run a poll to smear Tim Pool and Jack Posobiec and hold up Ben Shapiro? Ben Shapiro is totally more trusted than Republicans than Jack Posobiec or Tim Pool. Yeah, okay. Sure. Ben Shapiro's candidate has not won a Republican primary in like 10, 12 years. Why would that be? Because they trust Ben Shapiro so much in the big con? I don't think so. But anyway, your candidate is going down in flames. Going down in flames. It's the worst presidential campaign in the history of modern presidential campaigns, and you're spending their money on trashing Jack Posobiec and social media influencers? If anything else, it just shows what an absolute amateur you are. Remember his comments that I don't know what I'm talking about? Trump is hemorrhaging white voters, and the non-white vote that Trump is getting now is a mirage. It's not a trend that we've been tracking since the advent of Donald Trump on the political scene. It's not a trend that we have literally hundreds of polls in our trend on Trump's. I'm talking about our own polling, which is clearly backed up by other pollsters now, other credible ones, not ones that aren't credible like Chris, who takes money to lie. Mirage, Democrats lose ground with Black and Hispanic adults. And I think it's very, very important that Lydia is making a distinction. There is a difference. Of course, they're making grounds with Black and Hispanic voters. But I found it very interesting that she chose to use the word adults in her headline because, as you know, Gallup does sample all adults, registered voters, and then used to pivot to likely voters in Labor Day, right around Labor Day during a general presidential election when they would do tracking. Why is this important? Why am I stopping at the word adults first and making a big deal about this? Because I have been telling you that this is the first time in my lifetime, in my career in this industry, not even before, because you could go back and look at the trend. This is the first time in my lifetime that Republicans, and really, when I say that, it is really Donald Trump. But it is the first time in my lifetime that a Republican presidential candidate is leading to a greater appeal for the party among adults than among likely voters. And what does that mean? What does that say? It says that voter registration drives will produce a gold mine for Republicans right now. Voter outreach will produce a gold mine for Republicans right now. Democrats are essentially out of targets. Democrats have to wait for new arrived migrants to somehow naturalize or have babies, and then those babies get older here, and because they are anchor babies, they're born, U.S. born, that they will be able to vote, right? They need to wait for that. They need to wait for you to not pay attention to your children, either, run them through the public school systems where they turn out to be like loser gamers who don't get jobs and, sniff pills on their desk all day or something, right? Smoke a bunch of weed, have a bong stashed in the corner, ruin your house and get the wallpaper all messed up, that kind of thing. They need them, or they need you to not instill values in your kids good enough. So then by the time they go to college, after being already poisoned after 12, through 12 years of secondary school and high school, that they get to college and then these left-wing nutcase crack pipe smoking loser lunatics, twist your children's mind all up and make them into, so-called educated, white voters. This all takes time. And yes, Democrats are playing the long game, and it produced fruit, and it has been, and it's a big deal right now, and Republicans are struggling to deal with it. However, they're not making babies. They're not populating the earth. Democrat voters have to be imported and created, and all of that takes time. Republicans right now have targets everywhere. They have potential new voters everywhere. Democrats do not. Democrats' party advantages among Black and Hispanic adults are at new lows. Democrats retain smaller advantage among young adults, and the educational gap continues to expand. Let me take a real quick coffee sip here, coffee break, and then we'll continue here. But basically everything I just said. I'll be honest with you, I ignore Marquette. I do. They and the New York Times are kind of bordering on the tranche that they're bordering on the out of consensus tranche. So Marist, and just to tell people, we're talking about one of the commenters talking about there's going to be a new Marist poll out. If it's good news for Republicans and Trump, they'll want to tout it. But if it's bad news, they'll have ammunition to kind of attack it as an outlier, because Quinnipiac, Marist, and the Economist version of YouGov are absolutely garbage. Even, I have to say it, the University of Massachusetts Lowell, I mean, their poll yesterday was just ridiculous. It's not going to be D+8. Marist, look at how ridiculous that sample is. And I don't wait for party ID. What I'm telling you is they did other geography and education, probably threw up big red flags. They don't care. That's probably where, I mean, if I looked at their source data set, I'd probably see it immediately. But they are just like these continuous outliers. Marquette and the New York Times are bordering on that as well. Marist has, and it's a problem with Marist, they know, and they've admitted they have these problems. So yeah, whites was like 60%. It was D+6 with 60% white. It was nuts. I mean, laughing stock. And it was still only Biden +1. Laughing stock. But I told you guys, just expect presidential elections are different animals than midterms. So even when you see Quinnipiac saying, oh, see, we did better in the midterms, we really got this figured out, that's a load of crap. It is much harder to pull a presidential election. It can get away from you a lot easier than midterms. Midterms are lower propensity voters. I actually, retooled, not retooled, but I had a higher turnout projection. Lowering that turnout projection certainly would have been more favorable to Democrats, but presidential elections, especially in the Trump era, are filled with all of these voters that most pollsters are screening out and have been screening out. And then that compounds the problem already of that these pollsters, it's like a boys club. They just can't get away from the crappy data collection live caller. And listen, there's a place for that. There is. But if you're still just a live caller poll, then you're going to miss a ton of people, and you're going to subject the live caller mode is the biggest violator of, or I would say it's the most vulnerable to various response biases and cognitive biases, by the way, but that's a whole other question. And in 2020, I mean, we could show you in Minnesota, the live caller was like Biden +15. It was ridiculous, or Biden +13. Wisconsin was hugely favorable to Biden. It was not even close. It wasn't even right. So, they're going to continue to pump out this crap. And you can go to Real Clear Politics right now and just see a sea of red, and it's the same. And I don't mean for now, over the last year or so. And yet you'll see the same little shimmers of blue from the same pollsters every time. They're always outside the consensus. All right, the Republican and Democratic parties have distinct strengths within different subgroups of the U.S. population. However, Democrats have lost ground among some of their traditionally stronger support groups while gaining ground with others. This is based on analysis of Americans' party preferences, which includes those who identify as Democratic or Republican and those who are independent but lean toward either party. Of particular note, the Democratic Party's wide lead over Republicans in Black Americans' party preference has shrunk by nearly 20 points over the past 3 years. A mirage? Mirage, Chris? You freaking loser. Who's the grifter now, loser? I told you, man, jealousy don't look good on you. Don't look good on anybody. Jealousy makes people say and do ugly things. You jealous, bro? Democrats lead among Hispanic adults and adults aged 18 to 29 have slid nearly as much, resulting in Democrats holding only a modest edge among both groups. Wow. See, the difference is with Black Americans, they had such a huge advantage, 70 points, right? That, losing 20 still gives them what looks to be a sizable advantage. It's still at Biden plus 50. Whoa, right? But with Hispanics and voters age 18 to 29, they did not have 70-point leads. They only had roughly 30-point leads. So, recently, 3 years ago. So, when you lose 20 points with those groups, you're now talking about you're talking about being in a position where you better stress sampling errors for subgroups are higher. Sampling errors for subgroups are higher. Whereas Democrats were at parity with Republicans among men as recently as 2009 and among non-college educated adults as recently as 2019. They are now in the red with both groups. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Only partially offsetting these trends, the Democratic Party has gained adherence long-term among college-educated Americans, those with postgraduate education and those with a college degree only. Let me just highlight that. Only partially offsetting these trends. In other words, this obsession over the educated suburban female is asinine. They are dwarfed, especially in the Electoral College. They are dwarfed by a coalition that I see as clear as I see the lens of the camera I'm looking at right now. Urban, rural, together. Instead of this horizontal left versus right, black versus white, urban versus rural. It's vertical. The top versus the bottom. And in this country, there are a lot more people on the bottom. The math is elementary. These shifts in the party affiliation of key subgroups provide the demographic backstory for how Democrats went from enjoying significant leads over Republicans between 2012 and 21 to slight deficit in 22 and 23. The 27% of U.S. adults identifying as Democrats and the 43% identifying as or leaning Democratic are both new lows in Gallup's trend. The Democratic Party is generally not seeing major declines among other key groups, including women who retain a solid Democratic preference, adults 65 and older who are evenly divided now, and white adults who align with the GOP. Let me put this again too. Going to the NBC News poll, let me just tell you, because everyone's making this thing about the seniors and again, losers like Chris. All right. Not even misreading. They're lying to you on purpose, or they're too dumb to understand why it's not the entire story, because none of this ever happens in a vacuum. The NBC News poll, age 18 to 34, was tied. 65 plus was Trump plus 3. Seniors. 35 to 49 was Trump 45 to 44. And the 50 to 64, which is the biggest for now, demographic in the electorate, was Trump 53-39. I can see it. I can see it. It's like, I know, like Martin Luther King, I have a dream. I have a dream. Hang on one second. Yeah. So anyway, seniors are getting, they're more evenly divided than they used to be, when Republicans had huge advantages with them. That is no longer the case, but that is okay, because guess what? They are shrinking too as a share of the electorate. Hold on one second. We'll call right after. This has to. All right. Anyway, lean party ID by subgroup in 23. The largest advantage over demographic subgroups that either major party group had over the other in party preference in 23, is Democrats' 47 percentage point lead among non-Hispanic Black adults. 2/3 of Black adults, 66%, identify as Democrat or lean that way, whereas 19% now identify as or lean Republican. Whoa. And we're going to see the trend in a second. I'm going to show you the graphic in a second. Democrats also have strong advantages in the lean party identification of non-religious adults, postgraduates, and residents of big cities. And they hold a solid 9-point lead among women. That is not as big as it used to be. 9-point lead is not that huge. Someone's calling right now, and I was like, yeah, I'll call you back after the show. And he's like, sorry, I just remembered. Republicans' greatest pockets of strength are with people who attend religious services weekly, leading Democrats by 26 points among this group, and residents of towns or rural areas, 25. The GOP holds smaller double-digit advantages among Protestants, white adults, men, non-college educated adults, residents of the South, and semi-regular church attendees. And by the way, Protestants are still very, very Republican, but they've gotten a little less so, and that is because Hispanics have converted, and there's been a large Hispanic conversion from Catholic to Protestant over the last 10 years, even more. And as that's happened, what we generally see is that Republicans will gain with those folks. It'll back away a little bit. Then there'll be more conversions. They'll gain a little bit. They'll back away a little bit. But all in all, the trend is that Hispanics are actually getting more Protestant, especially certain areas that matter a lot. And then they're also getting more Republican. 2023 U.S. Lean Party ID by key demographics. And they say, in politics, as of today, do you consider yourself, and they rotate it, Republican, Democrat, or an independent? If independent, other, or no opinion. As of today, do you lean more to? And what we say is, generally speaking, do you consider yourself a rotate Republican, Democrat, an independent, or something else? If they say independent or something else, we say, which party do you more closely align with? Republicans, Democrats? Do you share little in common with either, or do you equally align with both? And we do it a little bit differently. And I think, honestly, the way we do it gets down deeper into their psyche, especially when you're talking about third-party voters or those others that can make a big difference. In 2016, right? Hillary Clinton lost a lot of those people, and that hurt her. That hurt her badly. But then in 2020, when they went back to largely voting for two-party choices, Biden won back more, and that gave him an edge in some areas. All right, so as you can see, when you lean, it's actually R+2. Democrats are -2. With men, Republicans have the edge 52 to 37. Women are only 49-40 Democrat. That's not good for Democrats at all. 18 to 29 is now only D+8. Hell, even the 30 to 49 used to be a much more Democratic group. And now it's R plus 2. The 50 to 64, which is huge, a huge part of the electorate, is now 50 to 40 R plus 10. And 65 plus is R plus 1. This is very bad for Democrats. But the 30 to 49 working age used to be filled with a bunch of not only white, but certainly white, non-college voters who still voted Democrat. Many of them, all folks, we've been over this a million times. They're all over the Ohio Valley, Western Pennsylvania, right? Where, hell, Gore, Kerry, Obama did much better with these people. And why does it matter is because 65 plus is going to balloon a little bit in the somewhat near future, even though it shrank. The boomer generation is falling off now as far as a side. But Generation X, okay, and there's different ways that you can measure what generation you're in. There's different standards, but particularly the 45 to 64, even though Gallup's doing 50 to 64. I like sticking with the exit polls. I like sticking with the traditional age brackets defined by exit polls and census over the years when it comes to politics. And that's for me, that's my way of saying, let's not confuse people. I don't know why everyone isn't standardized. They should be. And because there are detailed age groups that are broken down if you really wanted to get into it: 18 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 64, 65 to 74, and 75 plus. But the traditional is 18 to 29, 30 to 44, not 49, 45 to 64, and then 65 plus. Again, though, that 50 to 64 alone, it's bigger group, bigger version of it is 45 to 64, is the biggest demographic right now. As they age, obviously, some are going to go into the senior camp, but the Generation X and millennial generation eventually is going to have their larger say. So the fact that Republicans are making gains with them is very, very important. There's an argument about whether people change as they get older. And at least in the 20th century, the most liberal, Hubert Humphrey voter turned out to be one of the most conservative voters when they got older. But there was also a little thing called Reaganism. And then things changed. It's not always true that you're going to be, like Churchill said, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative when you get older, you don't have a brain. That isn't always the case. That's why we're seeing actually a lot of seniors, the 65 group is getting more Democratic. In part, it has to do with rational policy preferences. COVID certainly had an impact there. And they don't want a shakeup like MAGA wants a shakeup because they want to live their golden years. It doesn't matter to them. And I'm being real here. Let's be honest. If you're 65 and above, you have to admit that I'm right, even if you don't like what I'm about to say. You don't want a big shakeup because what happens to the country when you're gone doesn't matter to you. $30+ trillion in national debt. You don't want to affect your golden years and your Social Security or your Medicare. You don't want that to affect it at all because you already put your time in. You want what you were promised. People always say, well, don't they think about grandkids? Well, guess what, guys? A lot of them, it's a new generation, a liberal generation that is now 65 plus that lived through the 60s. Many of them don't have grandkids. Many of them don't give a shit. Race, non-white or non-Hispanic white adults, 54 to 38. That's roughly the margin Trump carried whites over Biden, roughly. He did a little bit better against Hillary. Here's the thing now, though. If the NBC News poll, I can't wait to poll again nationally, because if the NBC News poll is anywhere near right, and Biden is actually several points lower than Hillary's bottom with white working class. When you get to like 34 as a Democrat in this, it gets really shaky. You get 32, it's going to be hard for you to win the Electoral College. You're at 29, where NBC News has Biden. You cannot win the Electoral College. People say, what about the educated white woman in the suburb? There aren't enough of them. It's amazing to me, Laura. Like, let's do a real quick thought exercise. The suburbs are about 50% of the entire electorate. Rural and urban America make up the other 50. And men and women in the suburbs are about split. So we know that that means female women are only about 25% of the electorate, right? And we're doing basic ballpark math here, right? Now, how many of them are educated? Only about 15%. So here we have this entire meltdown. And by the way, what about in battleground states? In the Electoral College, non-college voters are overrepresented. So you're obsessing over 13 to 15% of the entire electorate when you have states like Georgia and Michigan, which are majority non-college. Like, it's unbelievable. And you'll still lose them. So it doesn't matter anyway. This is what the Gallup trend is showing. You're still going to lose them anyway. And honestly, you're going to win some of them back in bad economic times. For instance, Trump is definitely winning some of them back because of immigration, the economy, and just these compounded problems. But he's not going to win back this huge share of them. It doesn't matter, though, because as Gallup just pointed out, the gains Democrats have made with these folks only partially offsets the gains that Republicans have made with others. That's right. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Blacks, Hispanics, urban, right. 18 to 29, 30 to 49. And of course, these demographics have overlap, right? So no college is 50 to 36. Some college is 49 to 40, which is a huge deal because in a lot of these states, especially in the Electoral College, some college is actually the biggest block in the electorate. College graduate only is only D plus 5. It is that post-grad that is D plus damn near 30 that really is where Democrats have gained. But the 4-year degree has been kind of like, going from, Trump losing him by like 11 points, 15 points, to now being in single digits. We saw this in the 2022 electorate as well. Republicans certainly did better with 4-year college graduates. It was about even. And they got much closer with postgrads. But the problem, there just wasn't enough non-college and some college in the electorate. They couldn't get them any voters out. And for people who say, but it was more Republican, Rich, right? Republicans are not all equal. And the higher turnout, higher interest Republican is in a midterm or a special election in environments like that are less Trumpy than the Republican Party overall that comes out say Trump during a presidential cycle. So the East is still Democrat plus 10, 49, 39. The Midwest now is R plus 3. The South, R plus 14. And the West is now only D plus 4. Big city, 57-32 to the Democrat. Honestly, that is that's not a terrible result for Republicans, but this is why I am saying like the opportunity that Trump has with these urban voters and how he outperforms other Republicans in urban areas is a huge deal because of the massive damage you can do by winning 5 points more in an urban area. Small city, D plus 1, that's nothing. It's like what would be a small city? Let me think. Gainesville, Florida. All right. The suburb of a big or small city is D plus 6. And that really is where Democrats have their their strength, that you're probably going to see like the metro suburbs. They use the word suburb as if like every suburb is the same. It is not. The metro suburbs are where Republicans struggle. In other suburbs, they do not. And a great example that I've brought up now a million times, if you're in North Carolina, which I know several of you are, think about an area like Morehead City. Okay? Morehead is very affluent. It is very wealthy. It's Trump plus 32. Horry County in South Carolina is not the same. Like the burbs in that area is not the same. The burbs in Beaufort are not the same as the burbs outside of Charleston. Suburbs of the big city, small city, D+6. Town, rural area is R+25. All right. And so you really see where the fight is here between certain urban areas, right? Because that would still be considered urban in the new definition from the census. Certain urban areas and rural America, small town America can combine and have a new Republican coalition. You don't even have to win the suburbs if that's the case. You fight it to a draw. And you're going to not only would Republicans win, they'd win comfortably in most areas, because the problem they're having is small city, big city combined in these urban centers. Once a state gets to be about 60%, if they don't do what I'm saying they need to do, once the state gets to be about 60% or more of that vote, that is when they lose the state. Georgia, Arizona. Georgia just cracked above that. Meanwhile, North Carolina is still in the 40s. There are exceptions like Florida, for instance, but that's because Florida has small cities. There really isn't, and forgive me, Florida, I love you, you know that. But there aren't big cities, big urban centers in Florida the way there are in other states. There's no Chicago equivalent. There's no New York equivalent. There's no Los Angeles equivalent. Miami-Dade. It's not like that. Tallahassee. It's not like that. Although Tallahassee, I would say, is probably more urban in traditional sense. Miami. Religion. Protestant is R+19. Now Catholic is R+4. The all-important swing vote. This is why I made a big deal about none. Look at it's D+30. Having no religious affiliation is D+30. This is why I made a big deal about how much stronger Trump runs among those who have no religious affiliation than traditional Republicans. Traditional Republicans get slaughtered like this. Trump did get slaughtered in 2020 among this group. But yet, the very same people who said, I voted for Trump in 2020, who have no religious affiliation, have swung considerably to Donald Trump over Biden in the last 3 years. Then again, you pit them again, you ask about Haley or you ask about DeSantis, it'll go right back to 58-28. Religious attendance weekly, R+26. Nearly weekly or monthly, R+14. Seldom or never, D+11. The Democrat advantage at record lows among blacks and Hispanic adults. Although Democrats continue to hold a formidable advantage over Republicans among non-Hispanic black adults in the U.S., their current 47-point lead is the smallest Gallup has recorded in its polling, dating back to 1999. Most of the decline has been recent, with the net Dem ID for this group falling 19 points from a 66-point advantage in 2020. At that time, 77% of black adults favored the Democrats and 11% the Republicans. So the 23 findings represent an 11-point decrease in Democratic affiliation since just 2020, folks, and an 8-point increase in Republican affiliation. Net swing again of 19 points, but it's not just what you hear. You remember, I'm, mocking Erin Perrin, was really funny. DeSantis' former spokesperson. She went on Team DeSantis, and then now every time she goes on Fox, her lower thirds claim she's Trump. It's hilarious. She's made the comment, which we went over the clip, and she was totally wrong. This really isn't about. Do we have it? Let me see if I actually still have it, because it would be a great example of what I'm talking about here. But she was saying that I may still have it. I wonder. Maybe not. That would be a shame if we didn't. I guess I don't. But yeah, that it's not really that Trump was gaining or even other Republicans were gaining. It's that Democrats were slipping so hard with these groups. That was not true. That is not true. And here you can see it, obviously. It's not, yes, Democrats have slipped. Some of them went to the third party option. I don't know, have backed off or whatever, but without a doubt, a little bit less than half of the overall net shift is represented by not just shifting away from Democrats, but actually going to Republicans. All right. So similarly, Democrats' 12-point advantage among Hispanic adults in 23 represents a new low in trends dating back to 2011. When, by the way, what happened in 2011? Financial crisis was ending. They're ending it there because if you were to go back before the financial crisis, you would see that it was actually pretty even with Hispanics. And I made this case in my speech, actually, that I gave when I was traveling. Republicans hurt them. They hurt these people. And Barack Obama came in promising hope and change. Hispanics, more than any other ethnic group in this country, had the American dream taken from them during the Great Recession. Crushed hopes and dreams. And the face of it was George W. Bush. And he was a Republican. So for better or for worse, for right or for wrong, that's what happened. And that's how Republicans lost support with the Hispanic community. It has taken over a decade and a half for this to change. Amazing that it took a billionaire white guy from New York City to do it. Hold on. All that ringing out there. I want to close the door. All right. So when Gallup began routinely interviewing in Spanish as well as English is in 11, that's why they went back to that. Meanwhile, white adults have maintained a 14 to 17 point preference for the Republican Party in most years since 2014. The parties were closer to parity among this largest segment of the electorate between 1999 and 2009. White vote was never this Republican. Why? They didn't win non-college whites, Republicans. They won more educated whites. And that's why now, for the first time ever, the likely voter model favors Democrats more than Republicans. But Republicans have, for the first time in my lifetime, an opportunity to go after these voters. And you can see it clear as day. I mean, what Gallup is outlining here is the way forward for Republicans. Everything they said they wanted after the 2012 autopsy that was conducted after failed candidate Willard Mitt Romney got his ass kicked, everything they said that they wanted is now within their grasp because of Donald Trump and their hatred for this guy. And the fact that because Rush Limbaugh was right about this, the fact that he exposes them for the frauds they are, that's why they don't like Donald Trump. That's why Republican establishments and, Republican lawmakers and leaders don't like Donald Trump. It's because you can't continue the grift with somebody like Donald Trump around. He's going to call you on it. You've been promising to end Roe v. Wade for 4 decades. Why haven't you done it yet? I'm going to do it. You've been promising to drill an Anwar since the 80s. Why haven't you done it? I'm going to do it. You've been promising to secure the border since Reagan made that awful amnesty deal. Why haven't you done it? I'm going to do it. You promised to care about the economy. You promised to care about employment. You promised to care about families all the time. You don't. NAFTA, the WTO, you're negotiating TPP before he comes along. Why haven't you renegotiated these things yet? I'm going to do it. That's why they hate Donald Trump. Net Democratic leaned party ID by race and ethnicity. Look at, again, non-Hispanic white adults, all the hemorrhaging Chris Wilson was talking about. Asshole. It's actually -17. It's at the most Republican it's been since Gallup posted it up here since 1999. What an idiot. Non-Hispanic black adults, 72, 68, 75, 74, 79. Here comes Barack Obama, hits a high, dips down a little bit during Obama's era, but then he's up for re-election, goes back to 76. Along comes Donald Trump. It starts to tick down a little bit. How could that be? Look at that, 68 by 2016. And it just keeps going. Where's the pop back up? Never returned above 70. Even when Joe Biden wins in 2020, it's still not that high. Why? Because of what we have been talking about for so long. Had Donald Trump won, we'd have talked about it a lot more. He more than doubled his black support among black women. He did double his support among black men. And it's been falling ever since. Tick, 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 tick. Down, 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 down. And of course, we see Hispanics, which were started the tracking in 2011. It's not even the tracking. It's that this is when they also started to interview in Spanish. 26-point lead in. Obama's being reelected, right? Pops back up, actually, because of the wall, even though Trump does better with them. Isn't that funny? The Democratic advantage popped back up in a year where Donald Trump actually improved his support among Hispanics. Republicans did not enjoy that support. And it started going down, popped up here and there a little bit, back to 31. During 2020, but however, when Trump did do better with Hispanics, it went down to 28 points, and now we're all the way down to 12. This is massive. Don't let anybody tell you different. I would not have spent this long on the show talking about this if there wasn't a good reason for me to do it. I can come on here, month after month, poll after poll, and beat the dead horse about this, against the voices of idiots like the DeSantis pollster and everybody else. But this is Gallup. Nobody's been tracking this longer than Gallup. They weren't particularly Trumpy. I hate to tell you. In fact, they were kind of bearish on Trump's approval all throughout his administration. And yet, here we are. Demographic trend tables showing the full party ID response for all three racial ethnic groups from 99 to 23, as well as education, age, and gender subgroups can be found at the end of this story. Education groups diverging more than ever by party. Between 99 and 2013, educational groups showed modest differences in their party affiliation. Since then, and particularly since 2017, when Donald Trump became president, those differences have expanded greatly. There are two things. Of course, Trump came in with Trumpism, but as you remember, if you guys have been with me for a while, remember me going over those specific counties to explain the suburban shift in the vote, especially educated suburban voters. It isn't just. Notice whites are actually getting more Republican. Those suburbs are getting less white. We're not just talking about suburban white women here anymore. Loudoun County. And it's not just immigration or immigrants who come in who are educated immigrants. It's from where they came in throughout the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, as we showed in that episode. Somewhere like Loudoun County, they were bringing in European, largely people of Christian faith who are educated. Also, the Asians that were being brought in were more Indian Sikh. Anyone who was coming in from China had Tiananmen Square firmly on their mind. They thought that Chinese were an oppressive government. Now, European has been replaced by Latin and other Asian countries that are not like those immigrants that have come in and that came in the 80s and the 90s. Certainly less Indians, a lot more Chinese that are not as negative on the current regime as they once were. They now don't view the Chinese government as oppressive. They now view them as practical. They're not coming in to fully assimilate. They are absolutely proud of the changes and the strides that their country has made. And there's a lot more to go with that. I mean, it's, less Central and Northern Europe, more Mogadishu. And they're educated. Many are educated. And that's where they're going. That's what Loudoun County is not what it was 30 years ago. I know I got viewers who are live in Loudoun County or used to live in Loudoun County. The people I just went and did the speech to. It's Florida now, but originally the chair of that group, he's from Loudoun County. We were just talking about this. It's a totally different area. And the Loudoun County story is the story everywhere. Anyway, as a result of these changes, adults with postgraduate education have become the most democratic of the 4 educational categories, while those with no college experience are now the least. These 2 groups now show the largest political divide between the most Democratic and most Republican educational subgroups measured in any year to date. And here you can see it. No college, which is a green solid line. All right. Some college, graduated college, right? Or college graduate, which means 4-year degree. It's really not that Democratic. It's just slightly Democratic. Some college is slightly more Republican. And this is, again, a big deal. So in the numbers where we would show you how DeSantis would be, very, very close in a state like Iowa with Biden, even in his own damn state, only leading by like 2, whereas Trump would be up like 10, in Iowa, 8 in Florida. That some college group is huge. It's a huge part of it. And I got a theory about it. Some of them were non-college when Trump won in 2016. Some of them became some college. They simply didn't move on to college graduate territory because there were economic opportunities for them to take advantage of. So they went maybe to a community college or even another, whatever, got a 2-year degree, then went out and started making money. Young adults show the lowest Democratic support since 2005, which is significant because George W. Bush did not do that poorly with younger voters. After 2005, when Americans' party preferences were fairly similar by age, net Democratic Party affiliation increased sharply among 18 to 29-year-olds. At the same time, it leveled off or fell among older adults. Obama was huge. Notice they like to point out how Trump was one of the, if not, they're arguing, the reason for the educational divide. When it comes to age, they're not showing you or telling you. Nobody wants to mention the role that Barack Obama played in that. He caused these younger subgroups to just blow up for Democrats. Yet he scared the shit out of anybody who was 65 years and older. By 2010, young adults were the only age category giving the Democrats an edge, and their Democratic orientation remained strong until it fell just 8 points in 23, the slimmest since 2005. Adults aged 30 to 49 became more Democratic between 2013 and 18, but since then have returned to being roughly equally divided. This is reflected in a -2 net Democratic identification score in 2023, about tied with adults 65 and older at -1. If these figures hold in 24, it would be the first presidential election year since 2000 that Democrats haven't had a double-digit advantage among 18 to 29-year-olds. And the first presidential election year since 2004 that they haven't been at a deficit among 30 to 49-year-olds. It's huge. That they have been at a deficit. That is core working age. How long have we been talking about this? Essentially since we started the Trump v. Biden rematch polling on a consistent basis. We started it just in time to see it start slipping away from Biden. I am arguing, I am telling you, this is a proxy right now for Biden, Trump. Just like in 2010, the numbers they're citing was a proxy from Obama and Republicans generically. At the time, who was the last in their mind? John McCain. Then comes 2012, it's Mitt Romney. Normies have proxies in their head for this stuff. And in 2004, well, it was cool to be a Republican. It's patriotic to be a Republican. If you weren't a Republican in 2004, you were basically a terrorist sympathizer. You don't remember that? That residual shit had been lingering since 2002. Meanwhile, for the fourth consecutive year, adults aged 50 to 64 are the least Democratic, leaning Republican by 10 points. I just think this is so huge. It's also completely validating of what we had been saying, isn't it? Right? Right. Let's see. So you see it here. We know this is the trend. It is what it is. We already just went over it. A lot of people make a big thing out of the, I don't know if I often agree with Nate Cohen, but I do have to say he had written a piece recently about, this is what is behind Democratic strength in special elections. It's not predictive, all right, which he did not stress enough, but it's not predictive. It's more indicative of the shift with party preference among voters of different age groups and education. What used to be a Republican advantage in these kind of elections is now a disadvantage to them because of the shift with college voters and the shift with age. Older voters, Democrats, particularly even Biden, are doing better with than they typically do or have in recent years. Everyone just assumes seniors are super Republican. That is not true. They used to be called the party of the old, rich white men. Well, that's just not true anymore. Democrats are now the party of the rich. And they certainly have their own old, rich constituency. That's why the culture wars and the meme wars, and not front and center with culture wars like DeSantis tried to do in his presidential campaign, which failed miserably. They are a larger sub-context that is running beneath the surface of all the other debates and national discourse. If you don't think that all the late shows are running clips of the Brendan Dilley's meme team for a reason, they've been doing this because, they're going to mock DeSantis while the target is DeSantis and Nikki Haley, but they're bringing them in the fold and even stealing a lot of their stuff because they're preparing to try to fight back. They know it's going to hurt Biden. They know it is. They understand the right has now learned how to fight on that, on their level. I'm not sure they know what to do with it yet, though. Just judging by Trevor Noah and all the other he's such an idiot. But we've seen people. What's the name? Colbert, others. They're all taking their stuff. They are trying to get you ready and their audience ready for when they try to fight back because they know it's going to hurt Biden. Did you get my text?
No.
Oh, you didn't? I just texted you. It's just because, check it out. Anyway, party gender gap persists as men show record GOP leanings. Gallup is long, and by the way, it's not a record for women. And actually, let's just go through it because instead of talking with it, you can see women here used to be actually more Democratic. In 2018, when you were, ladies, the subject and the target of the biggest social desirability bias campaign ever run on, and ever, suburban woman, the woman. You were totally abused. In 16, you were told your men, your husbands taught you how to vote. How dare you vote for Donald Trump? Your husbands forced you to do that. They did, though, right? You remember, Laura. You remember.
I remember.
And then it became a social bias campaign that if you wanted to be acceptable, socially acceptable, and seen and as thinking for you, being able to think for yourself, especially if you have an education, then no decent, self-respecting woman votes for Donald Trump and Republicans. Meanwhile, just 2 years earlier, it was much closer. Now, it's even closer than it was in 2016. It's bad news. For men, however, it's the largest gap favoring Republicans since, I don't know, this may be a record, actually. Let me go back. I thought it was larger at one point. I'm wrong. It is not. It is not. So the gap continues to shrink with women. Last year was only 10, by the way. In the midterms nationally, Men and women were not that far off. Men voted for Republicans. Women almost damn near split. I mean, that's really what happened. So considering now that gender gap is even smaller with women now than it was during the midterm, when Republicans won the popular vote by two point whatever. It's a big deal. In 2020, when Biden won, it was 15, then 21 popped up a little bit, but it's down ever since. Now here we are in 23, it was 9. Very curious to see when they update this before the presidential election. And they will. Meanwhile, men are as Republican as they ever have been. And even when Barack Obama won in 08, men were D+4. Very interesting. When Mitt Romney lost, men were R+4. Women were D+14. When Trump won, women were D+12, men were R+5. So the environment, you get the point. And how is that happening? Well, you ran out of white men. It's not white men, very clearly. It's Hispanic. On both accounts, male and female. You've run out of white people to convince. You ran up against the educated liberal who's been indoctrinated now. You're basically up against the ceiling, despite what Ben Shapiro and all the other idiots like Clay Travis want to tell you. It's maxed. Can you do a little bit better? Sure, a little bit better. You can't break into these numbers unless you start cracking into non-white voters. And that's who pushed men to R+15. That's who pushed women to D+9. All right. So the bottom line, reflecting the national trend, got to wrap it up here. Several key subgroups of the U.S. showed declining Democratic support in 23, which in most cases meant an increase in the group's Republican identification and leaning, combined with a drop in Democratic identification and leaning. The major subgroup, bucking, that is adults with postgraduate education, who have become one of the most Democratic-leaning groups in the U.S. The data show the Democratic Party retaining advantages among people of color and young adults, but in 23, it was weaker position among these groups than at any other point in the past quarter century. My God. Democrats' reduced support among blacks and Hispanic adults should be especially concerning for the party, given Republicans' continued strength among white adults who remain the majority of the electorate. You guys, locals, there you go. If you want it. Rumble, here you go. I just want to make sure you guys have this. Getter, I'm coming to you too. Don't worry. YouTube, there you go. And Getter, here you go. I mean, there's the article if you want to see it. Take what we talked about here. Make sure that you are well armed, with the facts when these idiots come at you, like Chris Wilson and others from Not a Wit of Intelligence, whatever the name of that firm is called, with these ridiculous asinine arguments. Maybe in your shit polling, but in everybody else's polling, it's very clear what is going on. And of course, ironically, we are the ones who weren't paid by a candidate. You were. So if you're the outlier here, maybe it's because you're just a freaking liar.
So they're polling for job security.
Yes, it's right. You're polling right. You're polling for job security, what your client wants to hear. The rest of us are polling and trying to be accurate. Oh my God, the Marquette poll has Trump leading by 1. I'm shocked. Giga Chad, shocked. I love your name, by the way. Giga Chad Wojak. Love that shit. I'm shocked at that. Kate, welcome to the community. All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to boogie. We're going to talk a lot more. We have, of course, tomorrow. Don't miss the coverage. If you're a YouTube member or a local supporter, don't miss the coverage of the Nevada caucuses. And then we're on Friday on Inside the Numbers. We're going to talk more about what we're doing with polling because we're going to poll over the weekend. A whole lot going on. So do not miss it. Don't forget, if you like the videos, like them and share them far and wide. It does a lot of good. It does a lot of help. Don't forget to hit the notification button if you are subscribing on Rumble and Local on YouTube. That'll let you know when we're going to go live. But of course, the best place to follow us, folks, as always, is on Locals. peoplespundit.locals.com. peoplespundit.locals.com. Sean Parnell, Battleground, 5 p.m. Eastern time tonight. I'll be on and talk more about my little trip and what happened last night. All right. So don't miss it. 5 p.m. Eastern time. God, am I missing anything? Share the Public Polling Project far and wide. You can help us a great deal by sharing it with your friends and other like-minded people who want to see crowd-funded, publicly sponsored polls. All right. That's it.
And as always, thank you for.
And as always, thank you for your support. And we will see you later tonight on Battleground. Friday, we'll be talking the results in the Nevada caucus and the new polls that are coming up. All right, none but love for you. Deuces. Oh, Lord did it right at the perfect time. That was dead on, Lord. Nimrata, embarrassed in Nevada. Nimrata was embarrassed in Nevada. Cha! Nimrata was embarrassed in Nevada. Later!